In my father's eyes, my mother Lin Jiao Jiao was the capital's famous ditzy beauty, but she herself didn't like this title, so she always put on an act of being shrewd and calculating, yet somehow couldn't quite figure things out, a charmingly naive appearance. Until my father wanted to move on and remarry, after my mother got the divorce papers. This is my dowry, taking it. This was bought with my dowry money, taking it. This was jointly acquired after marriage, taking half. My father, what happened to the ditzy beauty? The soon, too, new wife. You call this not being able to figure things out? She'd scrape 3 pounds off the ground if she could. My father often said that when my mother was young, she was the capital's famous ditzy beauty, pure and genuine, yet beautiful and captivating. The moment he saw my mother, he fell head over heels, so he took the initiative to propose. From then on, they were a harmonious couple, better than immortal lovers. But my mother told my father that she didn't like this title at all, so she always put on an act in front of my father, appearing shrewd and calculating, yet somehow making people think she couldn't quite figure things out. My father said he loved this charmingly naive side of my mother the most. She had the propriety of a noble lady, yet possessed a unique charm that surpassed others. What satisfied him most was that both his children inherited his intelligence, clever, wise, generous, and proper. Thus, my father's inner courtyard was the cleanest among all the noble families in the capital. No bedwarmers or concubines, only my mother alone. Even if mocked by his colleagues, he never wavered from his original intentions, happily living with his beloved wife and young children. Because my father kept himself pure, and came from a prestigious noble family, not only was my mother the envy of all the madams in the capital, but I was also the envy of all the noble ladies in the city. But I was never proud, nor did I ever gloat about having no concubines, no half-brothers or half-sisters at home. I always presented myself as humble and courteous, tolerant and magnanimous, earning a reputation for being dignified, elegant, graceful, and proper. Plus, I was quick to learn from a young age and mastered music, chess, calligraphy, and painting. So even though I am still 2 years away from my coming-of-age ceremony, many madams have already hinted to my mother, openly or subtly, that they want me as their daughter-in-law. As for my brother, no young nobleman from any prestigious family ever envied him, because they all believed that having a lovely wife and beautiful concubines was one of life's great pleasures, and staying faithful to just one woman wasn't anything impressive. But my brother presented himself differently from them, and he had many famous quotes attributed to him, such as a good man should keep himself pure, at home he should be loyal to his wife and family, and outside he should be loyal to his sovereign and country. A true man's word is his bond. If you can't keep a promise, don't make one lightly. Therefore, although we siblings both grew up in the same family, both raised under our mother's guidance, the path my brother took was different from mine. I took the path of being graceful, proper, tolerant, and magnanimous. He took the path of keeping himself pure and maintaining noble character. Among all the noble families in the capital, whenever anyone mentions us siblings, they would praise that Duke Qingguo is truly blessed. Both children are outstanding. The son Shenlin and daughter, Shenyan, not only have good family backgrounds and looks, but most importantly, they have good character too. So, I can guarantee that if the capital were to select the best daughter-in-law candidate and the best son-in-law candidate, it would definitely be none other than my brother and me. Our performance as siblings made our father even more smug about his own judgment and family upbringing, cherishing everything he has now even more. But this is only what my father thinks. Actually, my mother is the mastermind behind how we siblings turned out. It really doesn't have much to do with my father. When it comes to educating children, at most he occasionally checks in, tests us a bit, then offers a few words of encouragement, and that is it. As for genetics, my brother and I most likely take after our mother. After all, my father has no talent for studying, no perseverance for martial arts. He really doesn't have much good to pass on to us siblings. My mother comes from the Amping Marquis manor. As the legitimate daughter of a Marquis family, her upbringing is naturally impeccable. But my mother has said that the intelligence and strategic thinking she displays to my brother and me is thanks to my maternal grandmother. My maternal grandmother is different from my mother. Her background was very ordinary. My maternal grandmother's father was only a 5th rank official. Elsewhere, a 5th rank official would already be considered a high-ranking official. In the capital, a 5th rank official can only be considered a petty official. However, my maternal grandmother, relying on her remarkable appearance and exceptionally high IQ and EQ, leaped across several social ranks, and married up into the Amping Marquis manor. And she quickly established her footing in the Amping Marquis manor, earning unanimous praise from everyone in the household. My maternal grandfather also loved and cherished her deeply. It wasn't until after they had 3 sons and 1 daughter together that, under my grandmother's repeated persuasion, he took in 2 concubines of good standing. My maternal grandmother raised my 3 uncles and my mother very well, and she never mistreated the concubines or the children born to them. Therefore, my maternal grandmother was renowned as an exemplary wife throughout the noble circles of the entire capital. My mother said that when she was young, grandmother told her that although women cannot go out and achieve great deeds like men can, they still shouldn't give up on themselves, with their hearts revolving only around men. They should strive to learn to read and write, acquire more skills, and make themselves more outstanding. Within the limited space for personal development in life, manage one's own life well. Let oneself and one's children live in a comfortable family atmosphere. Living comfortably for a lifetime, this is a woman's career. This is a woman's success. So my mother studied at home with my uncles from a young age. As long as she was interested in a book, my grandmother allowed her to read it. There were only 2 types of books she wasn't allowed to read. One was books like Erda for women, and admonitions for women that disciplined women, and the other was romance novels about poor scholars that would corrupt young ladies of noble houses. Apart from these 2 types of books, my mother could read anything else, and my mother set the same rules for me. My mother read many books, and naturally became more wise and sensible. Although she couldn't compare to my grandmother in either emotional or intellectual intelligence, she was still extremely outstanding among the young ladies of noble families. So before my mother even met my father, she had already won my grandmother's favor. Originally, my grandmother worried that my father's personality was too carefree, and that he wouldn't get along with my mother, but she really liked my mother. So after the 2 families had already communicated, she deliberately arranged a chance encounter for my parents. It was this one encounter that made my father praise my mother endlessly, even refusing to marry anyone but her. My father's reaction was even better than my grandmother had expected, and her fondness for my mother grew even more. Because my father had once declared that the noble ladies of the capital were all a bunch of scheming women, he would rather remain unmarried his whole life than be tainted by them. These words gave my grandmother quite a headache. She didn't think being calculating was a bad thing, as long as it wasn't snatched from someone else's hands. What is wrong with people striving for their own interests? Who would have thought that after meeting my mother just once, my father personally said he wanted to get married? My grandmother, afraid my father would change his mind, hurriedly sent someone privately to ask my mother's opinion. Seeing that my mother was also willing, she immediately hired the best official matchmaker to propose marriage. After my father and mother got married, he completely changed from his former ways of only indulging in food, drink, and pleasure, and became a capable man. This made my grandfather and grandmother so gratified that they shed tears of joy, and they became even more satisfied with my mother. Even though my father was unwilling to take concubines, and only stayed devoted to my mother alone, my grandfather and grandmother never raised any objections. Even though my mother only gave birth to me and my older brother, my grandfather and grandmother were very satisfied. Not only did they not force my father to take concubines, they were actually worried that if he did, he might be led astray by them again. Combined with seeing how excellently my mother raised me and my brother, they completely accepted the fact that my father had few heirs, because they knew well that all of my father's changes were because of my mother. So even though they all knew that my mother was actually not a foolish beauty at all, on the contrary, she was exceptionally wise, shrewd, and capable, especially skilled in business. Now all the family's shops were managed by my mother, but everyone had a tacit understanding, and no one ever let it slip in front of my father. The entire Duke's mansion became my father's dream paradise. All 3 generations of us, young and old, were his dream weavers. Later my brother and I gradually grew up, my grandfather and grandmother gradually aged, and my father became the new Duke of Qing. My brothers and my status rose accordingly, and families inquiring about marriage proposals wore down our doorstep. After my brother became the top scholar in the imperial examination, he was betrothed to the eldest legitimate granddaughter of Grand Tutor Yang. Although the Yang family was not a prominent noble family in the capital, they had produced 2 prime ministers and 3 grand tutors. Moreover, the Yang family raised both their sons and daughters with utmost care. So the Yang family is not only a noble house greatly admired by scholars throughout the land, but also one of the most sought-after families for marriage alliances among the major clans in the capital. My brother was able to secure an engagement with their eldest legitimate granddaughter, partly because my father doesn't take concubines. It is also because of my brother's good family background, and even more so because of the good image my brother worked hard to cultivate. After all, among noble families, everyone wants their daughter to marry a fine young man who won't take concubines. But when it comes to their own sons, they hope he'll have a house full of wives and concubines, with many descendants. After my brother's engagement was settled, my mother began devoting all her efforts to planning my marriage. As for my father, he remained as clueless about these matters as always. Blissfully ignorant yet simply happy, he took all the credit for himself. He believed it was because he led by example that my brother was able to secure an engagement with the Yang family's eldest legitimate daughter, although he did have some merit in this matter, but most of it was due to my mother's scheming behind the scenes. Based on my father's conduct and the thoughts expressed by the noble ladies of the capital's great families during their casual conversations, my mother crafted a persona for my brother that all the wives and young ladies would adore. However, our family remained the same as before. No one contradicted my father, and instead everyone praised him. My mother said long ago that grandmother taught her, when dealing with people of different temperaments, you must adopt different strategies. For someone like my father, you need to constantly encourage him. If he has one part good, you have to talk it up to 7 parts. But you can't just praise him randomly, it has to be well-reasoned and substantive. Only then can the praise truly touch his heart. This kind of effective praise not only shapes him into the person you like, but also gives him a tremendous sense of achievement and psychological success. The husband my mother chose for me was the son of noble consort Lan, Prince Ping, named Xiao Jing. Before entering the palace, noble consort, Lan and my mother were close friends, as dear as sisters. A year before the palace selection, through my maternal grandmother's scheming, my mother successfully caught the eye of the madam of Duke Qingguo's manor, my paternal grandmother, and got engaged to my father. Noble consort Lan was 2 years younger than my mother, and being from the Zhengguo general's manor with its distinguished military merits, she was required to enter the palace, so she couldn't get engaged early like my mother did. After noble consort Lan entered the palace, since all the high positions were already filled, her initial rank wasn't high, and she wasn't qualified to summon people into the palace for visits. Later, after giving birth to Prince Ping and with the death of consort Shu, one of the 4 consorts, she was finally granted the title of consort Shu. But considering that consort Shu had just passed away, calling her consort Shu felt somewhat inauspicious, so the emperor gave her a different title, Lan, and she became consort Lan. Consort Lan became a proper mistress in the palace, qualified to summon people for visits. Thus, my mother was able to enter the palace and meet with consort Lan several times each year. After several years in the palace, consort Lan and my mother remained as close as sisters. Because ever since consort Lan entered the palace, my mother has sent her New Year gifts every year, and my mother's gifts were very thoughtful. First, the pastries she loved before entering the palace. Second, fashionable jewelry and fabrics from outside the palace. Third, loose silver. This allowed her to reminisce about the happy times before entering the palace, while also giving her enough silver and items to reward the palace servants. So after consort Lan gained the privilege to summon people into the palace for conversation, she first summoned her family, and then my mother. My mother would always bring me and my brother along. Later, when my brother grew older, and it became improper for him to enter the palace, my mother only brought me. Therefore, when my brother was young, he was quite familiar with Prince Ping. As for me, I wasn't very familiar with him, because at first, I met him as an infant. In his eyes, I was just a little baby who couldn't play with them. When I grew a bit older, he went to the frontier, and that trip lasted 5 years. During those 5 years, my mother and I often entered the palace to keep consort Lan company, and she adored me immensely. But she didn't dare to arrange things for me without Prince Ping's approval. 3 years ago, Prince Ping achieved a great merit in the army for the first time. His Majesty was overjoyed and sent a letter asking what reward he wanted. Prince Ping replied that he hoped His Majesty would grant him an imperial edict, stating that no one could interfere with his marriage, and he would have full authority over it. When His Majesty received the letter, he immediately brought it to consort Lan's palace, both amused and exasperated. After all, the Anyun Prince Ping mentioned included his own father, but the emperor wasn't really angry with him either. Although the Duke of Zhengguo's household was loyal, they were ultimately outsiders. Later, when Consort Lan entered the palace, the Duke of Zhengguo's household became imperial relatives by marriage, always a blade hanging over his heart. Now that he had a son who could share military power, he felt incredibly relieved. So, although he scolded this troublesome son together with Consort Lan, in the end he still ordered someone to deliver the imperial edict to him with utmost haste. Moreover, because of his military achievements, and the fact that the reward he requested wasn't really much of a reward, the emperor promoted Consort Lan's imperial edict merits. So, even though Prince Ping was already 20 years old, he still hadn't settled on a marriage. I heard he would be returning to the capital this year, and many noble ladies, including my mother, started inquiring about his situation. They learned that he had kept himself pure at the border, with no romantic interests or concubines. All the ladies and young misses were secretly competing, hoping to win his favor on the day he returned to the city. My mother and I were no exception, but everyone's plans failed to materialize, and all the prepared schemes came to nothing, because Prince Ping didn't return with the main army. No one knew when he had slipped back. While everyone was eagerly watching for the army, he appeared on the city tower together with the emperor and the crown prince. Everyone took one look and thought, why bother? Might as well go home and call it a night. But the scheme between my mother and me had only just begun. With Consort Lan as our inside source, we had first-hand information about Prince Ping's preferences, because when Consort Lan summoned Prince Ping for questioning, my mother and I were behind the screen. I heard Consort Lan ask, "Jinger is already 20 now. The heir of Duke Qingguo, who is the same age as you, got engaged this April. Do you have anyone you fancy?" Prince Ping replied, "Imperial Mother, your son has devoted himself to guarding the border and has no one he fancies." Hearing Prince Ping's answer, my mother and I felt greatly relieved. After all, although we had our eyes on Prince Ping, if he already had someone he fancied, we would have no choice but to give up. There is more than one fine man in the world. Why lower oneself **** to fight for a marriage that doesn't belong to you? Consort Lan asked again, "What kind of woman would catch my son's eye?" Prince Jing's reply this time came a bit slower, as if he was thinking. Then he replied, "Your son doesn't know either. Does Imperial Mother have a daughter-in-law in mind? If so, why not tell your son about her?" Prince Jing's answer was beyond the expectations of the three of us. But it was indeed a pleasant surprise. Consort Lan observed his expression, and only after confirming he wasn't being sarcastic did she feel at ease. So after careful consideration, she said, "Imperial Mother does indeed adore a certain girl very much. She is the daughter of your mother's close friend, your Aunt Jiao Jiao. You met her when you were little, do you still remember?" Prince Jing thought for a moment and frowned. "That small and old-looking little girl?" This made Consort Lan laugh, and she playfully scolded, "You child, how can you talk about a young lady like that? Now this girl has grown into a graceful beauty with a poised and generous personality. She is quite well known in the capital, and who knows how many families have their eyes on her." Before Prince Jing could respond, a palace servant came in to announce that the emperor was summoning him to the imperial study. So he said to Consort Lan, "I will carefully consider what mother has said. Your son takes his leave." With that, he walked out. Seeing this, my mother and I exchanged glances, our eyes conveying the same message. Things didn't look promising for now. We'd have to try harder. After this visit, my mother and I didn't enter the palace again because my coming-of-age ceremony was approaching soon. Me mother was busy every day, personally handling everything from my attire and hairstyle to the menu planning, the arrangement of each dish, and the guest list. She strived for perfection, hoping I would make a stunning debut, outshine all the other noble ladies, and become the top noble lady in Prince Ping's eyes. As for my father, he wasn't able to participate in such a big event. After my brother's engagement was settled, he was ordered to go south for an inspection. This was a rare good opportunity, a sign of the emperor's trust and regard for him. So he left the capital feeling both happy and reluctant, happy to be valued, reluctant to leave my mother for over 3 months. Though my mother showed extreme reluctance at his departure, she was sensible enough to let him go with peace of mind. This made my father even more reluctant to leave her. Before departing, he promised to finish the inspection work as quickly as possible and return in time before my coming. of age ceremony. He also swore to my mother that he wouldn't so much as glance at another woman. Counting the days, it should be almost time for his return. Though my mother was busy preparing for my coming of age ceremony, she still found time to prepare the new tea my father loved, just waiting for him to come back. 2 days before my coming of age ceremony, my father returned as promised, but he didn't come back alone. He brought a woman with him, named Ran Niang. He said he rescued her during his inspection. At the time, this Ran Niang was selling herself to bury her father and was being harassed by some thugs. My father noticed she bore some resemblance to my mother in her youth, so he felt a twinge of compassion and saved her. Later, seeing how naive she truly was and fearing she might fall into danger again, he brought her all the way back with him. My mother's face turned pale and her eyes reddened on the spot, looking deeply wounded. Yet she didn't make a scene, giving my father enough face, and had the servants take Ran Niang to a guest room in the back courtyard to settle in. But anyone with eyes could see that what stirred in my father wasn't compassion. It was desire practically overflowing from his eyes. After having the person taken away and settled, my mother went into the room, ignoring my father, looking utterly heartbroken. No matter what my father said, my mother wouldn't open the door. My father had no choice but to sulk off to his study. I was worried about my mother, so after my father left, I went to see her. Who would have thought she wasn't upset at all? While I felt relieved, I was also puzzled, so I asked, "Mother, do you truly have no genuine feelings for my father?" My mother sighed and said to me, "It is not that I have no genuine feelings at all. From the very beginning, my feelings for your father have been half genuine, half calculated." After hearing my mother's words, I was silent for a while, then, "Mother, why can't people give their whole heart to others? Half genuine, half calculated. Don't you find this kind of relationship exhausting?" My mother knew I was purely confused and wasn't blaming her. She raised her hand to hold me in her arms and explained gently, "When meeting people, only speak 3 parts of the truth. Never pour out your whole heart. The ancestors' words have their wisdom. You saw what happened today. You can't guarantee that others will never change. You can only ensure that you are strong enough to face any change. If I had given your father all my heart, setting aside whether we could have even gotten married, just look at today's situation. By now, your mother would probably be hiding in the room, crying, her eyes swollen, or would have made a scene with your father at the front gate, making you and your brother the laughingstock of others." I listened to mother's words and silently held her hand. She continued, "Yonner, look at those women who gave their whole hearts to men. How many of them are truly happy and not exhausted?" I nodded. It was indeed so. Another close friend of my mother's was a famously lovesick woman in the capital who offered up her entire heart, only to end up hanging herself. That day mother taught me another new lesson. You can only give 5 parts of your true heart to someone, but even with just 5 parts, you must act out 12 parts of suffering. My grandfather and grandmother soon learned of this matter. They called mother over and comforted her thoroughly. Then they summoned my father and scolded him in front of mother, making him apologize to her. My father hadn't been scolded in many years. This time he was scolded until his face turned red, feeling both ashamed and embarrassed. But he also knew he was in the wrong, so he followed grandfather and grandmother's words and sincerely apologized to mother. Mother forgave him, but with one condition: give Ran Niang some money and have her leave the manor. When father heard this, his expression stiffened, and he hemmed and hawed without agreeing. At that moment, an attendant by his side came to report that Ran Niang had secretly left, leaving only a letter behind. When father heard this, he hurriedly took the letter. After reading it, he shot mother a resentful glance, then ran out to chase after Ran Niang. Me mother watched my father's hurried departing figure and didn't speak for a long time. Grandfather cursed him as a disgrace, and grandmother kept sighing. Me brother and I looked at our mother with worried eyes, but didn't know how to comfort her. It wasn't until evening that my father brought Ran Niang back to the residence. This time, he no longer hid anything and directly called my grandparents, and the 3 of us, mother and children, together. He bluntly stated that he wanted to divorce my mother and marry Ran Niang as his wife. My brother and I were shocked, and grandfather and grandmother both said in unison that they would never agree. If it was to take her as a concubine, they could agree, but wanting to divorce and remarry, they would never agree no matter what. Me father looked at Ran Niang's innocent and pitiful appearance and made up his mind. He turned to threaten my grandparents. "If you 2 elders don't agree, I'll jump into the moat with her." Hearing this, my grandfather raised his walking stick and hit my father several times. My grandmother instinctively wanted to stop him, but after glancing at the three of us, mother and children, she hardened her heart and turned away, leaving my father alone. My father howled from the beating, but still refused to change his words. He even declared that Ranyang was already carrying his child. A month ago, he got drunk at a social gathering, and on his way back, somehow ended up in the wrong room and took advantage of her. He had to take responsibility for her and the child. Ranyang also immediately knelt on the ground, raising a pair of rabbit eyes red from crying, and said to my mother, "This servant knows she has wronged madam. Today I intended to leave Shen Lang and never see him again. It was Shen Lang who chased after me and saved this servant's life once more. Shen Lang has saved this servant twice. This servant is grateful for Shen Lang's deep affection and kindness, and is also willing to fight against worldly conventions this once. I beg madam to grant us this." After hearing Ranyang's words, my father felt even more that the two of them were Mandarin ducks being torn apart by my mother and grandparents, and he and Ranyang embraced and wept together. My grandparents said nothing more. My mother stood up and respectfully said to my grandparents, "Father, mother, this daughter-in-law is willing to divorce the Duke and let them be together." After hearing my mother's words, my father breathed a sigh of relief while also feeling somewhat guilty. He said, "Jiaoniang, I am sorry. Everything between us before, I always thought it was true love. It wasn't until I met Ranyang that I realized I had been living in vain all this time." These words not only made my mother's face turn ugly, but even my brother and I couldn't help but feel our hearts grow cold. Me grandparents' faces were grim, sighing repeatedly. But because my father threatened to die, they didn't know what to do. My mother said nothing. My father continued, "I am very grateful that you are willing to let me and Ranyang be together. After the divorce, besides your dowry, whatever else you want to take with you, I won't stop you." My mother asked, "Will you keep your word, or is this another lie to deceive me?" After hearing my mother's words, my father's face turned red with embarrassment, and he repeatedly said, "That is for certain. I will definitely keep my word." My mother then looked at my grandfather and grandmother asking, "Father and mother won't object either?" My grandfather and grandmother, they felt they had wronged it as compensation for her. Thus, my mother immediately had the servants bring brush, ink, paper, and inkstone, and had my father write the divorce agreement on the spot. After both of them signed, they sent servants to take it to the government office to have the official seal stamped on it. During this time, my mother also wrote a guarantee letter. It stated that after my mother divorced my father, besides being able to take her dowry, she could also take anything in the mansion that she liked. My father quickly signed and pressed his fingerprint, and my grandfather and grandmother did the same. After my mother put away the guarantee letter, my brother and I exchanged a glance together. We stepped forward and said, "Grandfather, grandmother, father, we siblings are willing to leave the Duke's mansion with our mother. Please grant us this wish." At this, not only was my father stunned, but my grandfather and grandmother also looked at us in disbelief. My mother was both surprised and moved, tears immediately welling up in her eyes as she choked out, "Linner, Yenner, have you thought this through?" Originally, she had planned to get her hands on her dowry and the family assets she had managed over the years, and then secretly give them to my brother and me. Who would have thought that we actually volunteered to leave the Shen family with her? My brother and I nodded together. We've thought it through, absolutely no regrets. Grandfather and grandmother immediately objected, unwilling to let my brother and me leave. My father was also reluctant to part with us. After all, we siblings had always been his pride, the pride of the Shen family. But as soon as my mother took out the guarantee letter, they fell silent. In the end, my mother decided that after my coming-of age ceremony, she would take my brother and me along with her dowry and leave the Shen family. That very evening, my maternal grandmother heard the news and hurried over to see my mother. The moment my mother saw grandmother, she threw herself into grandmother's arms and started crying. While crying, she said, "Mother, your daughter has disappointed you. I thought he was just taking a concubine, and I would agree after making a bit of a fuss with him. For the sake of my two children, I would have won his heart back, but he went too far, actually wanting to divorce me directly and marry that woman as his wife. Your daughter cannot swallow this insult, and doesn't want to keep entangling with him, so..." My maternal grandmother held my mother, quietly listening to her tearful complaints. Only after she finished speaking did grandmother take out a handkerchief and gently wipe away her tears. She joked, "How old are you now?" Still clinging to your mother's arms crying, "Aren't you afraid Yanner will laugh at you?" My mother glanced at me looking a bit embarrassed. Seeing that my mother was no longer upset, my grandmother pulled me to sit down, holding my hand in one of hers and my mother's hand in the other. She said to us, "Mother taught you to read and write, taught you strategies and tactics, not so you could accomplish some great feat, but simply hoping you could live a good life. If you are bullied and still swallow your grievances for the sake of so-called family harmony, how can that be called living well? How can life have so much perfection? Rather than forcing completeness, it is better to be free in imperfection." Hearing these words, my mother's inner gloom was swept away completely. Even I felt that grandmother's words were like a ray of light, shining into my heart, giving rise to boundless courage within me. Soon came the day of my hairpin ceremony, and many people attended, although my grandfather, grandmother, and my father were all present. Everyone had already learned through various channels that my father wanted to divorce my mother for some woman of unknown origin. The gazes directed at us mother and children were almost all filled with sympathy, but we pretended not to notice these looks and completed my hairpin ceremony according to the planned proceedings. Every own sympathy toward us turned into envy after the gifts from noble consort Lan and the Empress Dowager arrived one after another. What I didn't expect was that noble consort Lan's gift was actually delivered personally by Prince Ping. Clearly, my brother and mother didn't know about this beforehand either. But my mother quickly reacted, and after expressing her thanks, she had my brother take Prince Ping to be seated. Prince Ping's arrival shattered the hearts of all the noble young ladies present. During the time he had been back, let alone attending any noble ladies coming, of age ceremony he wouldn't even attend ordinary banquets. Seeing Prince Ping come to attend my coming of age ceremony, my father and my grandparents were all very surprised, glancing at my mother's and my faces several times. My mother and I pretended not to notice, and didn't explain anything to them. Early in the morning, the day after my coming of age ceremony, my mother had someone open the main gate. Outside the gate was the moving convoy my maternal grandmother had prepared for my mother, a total of 30 horse-drawn carriages. No one was surprised after all. When my mother married into this family, her dowry was extremely generous. My mother took out the abacus she often used in her maiden days, then had someone call my father and my grandparents, planning to settle the dowry accounts once they arrived. Me father came quickly, with his soon-to-be new wife by his side. My grandparents didn't come over, only sent word that my mother could take whatever she wanted. No need to be polite. Me mother hadn't planned to be polite anyway. Back when she read so many books, what she was actually most interested in was business. It was only because of her status that she had forcibly suppressed that interest. After marrying my father, although she secretly managed all the shops of the Duke's mansion and her own dowry shops, but to avoid giving herself away, she had never touched an abacus herself. Now that they had already divorced, there was no need to hide it anymore. So after my father and his new wife arrived, my mother picked up the abacus and checked it against the account books. After fiddling with the abacus for a while, she said to my father, "When I married into the Duke's mansion, although it was already wealthy beyond compare, the public treasury only had 62,570 taels of silver. From when I married in until this year, I've earned 592,742 taels for the public treasury. The treasury now has a total of 605,312 taels of silver. The Duke's mansion's daily expenses amount to 314,415 taels, leaving 340,897 taels. According to past customs, Yenner's dowry silver should be 30,000 taels, adding other dowry items. Let's count it as 50,000 taels for her. Linner's wedding will cost a bit more. Let's count it as 60,000 taels. As for other dowry items, the two of them can go pick from the storeroom themselves. Does the Duke have any objections?" My father's eyes had already widened in surprise. When he heard my mother's question, he repeatedly said he had no objections. Ran Yang beside him furrowed her brow but said nothing. My mother continued fiddling with the abacus while saying, "Of the remaining 230,897 taels, I've worked hard managing the Duke's mansion for many years. How much silver does the Duke think would be appropriate compensation?" My father was asked something rather awkward, and with his inner shock still not settled, he stammered, 30,000, no, 50,000, 80,000, I suppose. "What do you think?" My mother said nothing and continued fiddling with the abacus. Then she continued, the remaining 150,890. 7 taels, with 6 masters in the household now. Each person can receive 25,149 taels, and 5 chien. Upon hearing this, my father's expression turned somewhat unpleasant, and Ran Nyang beside him was so shocked her mouth couldn't close. My mother swiftly wrote up the silver division agreement with a few strokes, handed it to my father, and said, "Duke, please take a look. If there are no issues, please sign it." My father took the agreement, looked it over, picked up the brush to sign, and handed it back to my mother. My mother took the agreement and handed it to the money house manager she had specifically summoned, saying to him, "I trouble Manager Liu to have this divided clearly within today." Manager Liu took the agreement, cupped his hands to my father and mother, then withdrew. My mother then took the dowry list from the maid's hands and began directing the servants to move the dowry. "This is my dowry, take it away. This was purchased with my dowry silver, take it away. This was jointly acquired after marriage, take half of it." My father watched from the side, dumbfounded, then muttered to himself with a face full of confusion, "Wasn't she supposed to be a foolish beauty, not skilled at scheming?" The moment Mom whips out the abacus is legendary. Everyone thought she was a naive ditzy beauty, but she'd been secretly running the whole estate's finances for decades. She calculated every single tael of her dowry, the profits she made, and even the compensation for her years of labor, forcing her cheating husband to sign over 600,000 plus taels on the spot. He was left dumbfounded, muttering, "Wasn't she foolish?" While she stripped the mansion clean, she didn't just leave, she took the fortune. That is not a breakup, that is a corporate takeover. His soon-to-be new wife Ran Nyang wasn't much better off than him, stammering to my father, "How is this not being able to calculate? If she keeps calculating, she'll scrape 3 jin off the ground too." My father glanced at her and said nothing. He already agreed, he doesn't have the face to go back on his word. Me mother directed the servants while saying to me and my brother, "Bring your own people and go pick whatever you like from the storeroom. Once you walk out this door today, it'll be hard to get anything later." My brother and I smiled and agreed, then looked at our father. Seeing us looking at him, he hurriedly smiled gently and said, "Go ahead, take whatever you want." With his words, my brother and I exchanged a smile, and cleared out half of the valuable items from the storeroom. We were busy from morning until afternoon before we finally settled into our new home. The new home was also part of my mother's dowry. Although it wasn't as big as the Duke's residence, it was more than enough for the 3 of us. Even if my brother got married and had children, there would still be enough room. On the night we moved into the new home, my maternal grandfather's whole family came over and threw us a lively housewarming. Unexpectedly, Prince Ping came again, saying he was delivering congratulatory gifts on behalf of noble consort Lan, but his eyes kept sneaking glances at me, making everyone look at the 2 of us meaningfully. Ever since my father caused a scene with the divorce and remarriage, making our family the laughingstock of the capital, my mother and I gave up on Prince Ping. After all, his mother is a noble consort, and he is of royal blood. The princess consort he marries in the future must be a noble lady from a prestigious family. Now that I've left with my mother, just a widow and her child, we probably can't reach the position of a prince's consort anymore. I might as well give up on that idea, so as not to affect the friendship between my mother and noble consort Lan. Who would have thought that noble consort Lan would actually have Prince Ping personally deliver congratulatory gifts? Neither my mother nor I knew what this meant. Just as we were talking about this, the butler came to announce that the Yang family had come to visit, congratulating us on our move to the new residence. My brother, my mother, and I were instantly both surprised and delighted, after all that had happened. Although the Yang family hadn't come to break off the engagement, but the 3 of us had already given up hope, thinking that breaking off the engagement was only a matter of time. We didn't expect them to come congratulate us. Their intention was already Mr. Yang and Madam Yang, along with their 2 sons and my future sister-in-law. At the dinner table, I sat next to my future sister-in-law and secretly asked her, "Sister Yang, now that my brother is no longer the heir of the Duke's mansion, why do you still think highly of him?" My future sister-in-law glanced at the table where the male guests sat, smiled shyly, and gently told me the reason. "Although a junior shouldn't speak ill of elders, your father really is quite disgraceful. The way he treated your mother, our whole family thought it was too wrong, but we're outsiders after all. and it wasn't our place to interfere in the Duke's mansion's family affairs. But we've been paying attention all along at the time. We thought that if your brother abandoned your mother for the sake of the heir position, our Yang family would definitely come to break off the engagement. After all, someone who disregards right and wrong for power and wealth might become the next Duke of Qing in the future. Who would dare entrust their life to such a person? Upon hearing this, I instantly gained even more respect for the Yang family and my future sister-in-law than before. Being able to say such things shows they are also a family with excellent moral standards. This harmonious family banquet where both host and guests enjoyed themselves lasted for a long time, not ending until the moon was high in the sky. Before leaving, Prince Ping handed a letter to my mother and cupped his hands, saying, "Aunt, this is a letter my imperial consort mother wrote for you." Then he glanced at me, looking somewhat uneasy, and continued, "My imperial consort mother's wishes are also my wishes. I hope Aunt will grant us this favor." Then he bid farewell with a flushed face. My brother had just finished seeing off the Yang family and returned, only to go out again to see off Prince Ping. After returning to her room, my mother opened the letter. In the letter, Consort Lan expressed that she had already asked Prince Ping, and since he was already acquainted with us siblings, after this incident, he felt that both my brother and I were people of excellent character. Thus, he wished to form a deep friendship with my brother, and with me, he wished to walk hand in hand through life. She told my mother not to worry about other matters, no matter what choice I made, no matter how other things changed. The bond between them would never change. After reading the letter, my mother was so moved that her eyes turned red. When my brother came in and saw this, he thought my mother was grieving over my father's matter, and hurriedly comforted her. "Mother, please don't be too sad. You still have me and my sister. With my father's personality of not caring about anything, marrying someone like that, I am afraid there will be even more embarrassing incidents in the future. His hard days are yet to come. He'll have plenty to regret later." My mother quickly waved her hand and said, hurriedly, "I am in such a good mood right now, don't mention those unlucky people." She then handed the letter to my brother. After reading it, he finally smiled with relief. Afterward, my mother asked me, "Yonner, what do you think?" I smiled and said to my mother, "Mother, other matters can wait. For now, I just want to be a free wind." My mother looked at me, stunned for a moment. Then we smiled at each other. 3 years passed in the blink of an eye. 3 years ago, following my wishes, my mother wrote back to the imperial consort, politely declining the kind intentions of her and her son. Somehow this matter spread, and whenever people mentioned me, all they had to say was "doesn't know what is good for her." Who would have thought that my rejection didn't push Prince Ping away, but instead sparked his curiosity and competitive spirit. So during these 3 years, he took me to do things I had wanted to do before, but never dared to. Horse riding, archery, traveling. I felt the joy of wind brushing through my hair. I experienced the exhilaration of arrows flying from my fingertips, and in the embrace of famous mountains and great rivers, I learned to be optimistic and open-minded. I also inadvertently let Prince Ping see a side of me different from the rumors, but one that moved his heart even more. So in the year I turned 20, having had enough of being a free spirit, I decided to become a bride, and my brother, by this time, had already become the youngest cabinet minister, with a bright future ahead. He and my sister-in-law got married a year ago. The once most sought-after son-in-law candidate in the capital had now become a father to a little baby. When I got married, my nephew had just turned 2.5 months old, chubby and absolutely adorable. After my wedding, I followed Prince Ping to the frontier. My decision both moved and impressed him. None of the pampered ladies in the capital were willing to endure such hardship. Yet for him, I was willing to go with him wholeheartedly. What he didn't know was that I was actually willing to go because I knew the emperor was already old, and the crown prince would ascend to the throne in 2 or 3 years at the latest. By then, even if Prince Ping wanted to stay at the frontier, it would be impossible. Trading 3 years of getting to know each other and sharing hardships for a lifetime of good days, I thought it was absolutely worth it. As for my father, after divorcing my mother, he married the Ranyang he had been longing for. Ranyang gave birth to a chubby son for my father about 7 months after their wedding. Their family of 3 lived happily together, but little did he know that his wife being pregnant before marriage had once again made him the laughingstock of the capital. What he knew even less was that there would be many more things to make him a laughingstock in the future. After giving birth to her son, Ran Niang thought she had secured her position. From then on, she put away the gentle and tender demeanor my father once loved most, and became the very image he once despised the most. Ran Niang came from the countryside. If she were elsewhere, people would at least praise her for being genuine. But in the capital, she seemed completely out of place. So, whenever there was a banquet she attended, she became the entertainment for the noble ladies of the capital. The jokes she made could be talked about for days and nights on end. My father wasn't spared either. Not only was he dragged down by the jokes she caused, but she also forced him to become a joke himself. The mistress Ran Niang played the innocent flower to steal the husband. But once she got the position, disaster. She forced the duke to wear her tasteless outfit choices, mismanaged the household so badly servants stole more than she did, and turned the prestigious duke's manor into the capital's daily comedy show. The irony. The duke left his perfect dream weaver wife for true love, only to realize his true love was just uneducated chaos. He traded a diamond for a rock because he wanted something softer, and now he is wearing clown clothes to court poetic justice. Although officials of this dynasty have court attire, it is only mandatory for the Grand Court Assembly held once a month. At other times, they can wear casual clothes. In the past, my mother handled all of my father's seasonal clothing and style coordination. My mother had good taste, and his attire was always envied by his colleagues. Ran Niang heard about this from some servant, and made a fuss demanding my father throw away all his old clothes so she could handle his wardrobe instead. And so, every time my father went out, people could find something new to laugh about. What is more, because of her sudden rise to wealth, she insisted on managing the household, despite knowing nothing about it. In the end, the silver she embezzled wasn't even half of what the servants embezzled. Although the Duke's mansion suffered heavy losses when my mother divorced, she didn't completely destroy them out of respect for my grandparents. Besides, the Duke's mansion had deep foundations and wouldn't be crippled just because of a divorce. But now, because of her, its downfall came 20 years earlier. Their son, it is said, is just like my father was as a child. No talent in either literature or martial arts. My father always thought that my brothers and my excellence came from him. So when we siblings asked to leave with our mother, though he was reluctant, he didn't really care much. Now that his younger son turned out so useless, he assumed the boy wasn't his biological child. He and Ran Niang fought until their heads were bleeding, becoming the laughingstock of the capital once again. Grandfather and grandmother had no choice but to bring a doctor to verify. Without a doubt, the boy was his biological son. Only then did he believe what my grandparents had told him was true. All his glory and comfort over these years were thanks to my mother. The day before my wedding to the Prince of Ping, he shamelessly came looking for us. He kowtowed and apologized, said every nice thing he could, but my mother ignored him and instead leaked the news to Ran Niang. According to the servants who came back, Ran Niang fought with him all the way to the Duke's mansion. Both of them ended up looking absolutely wretched. In the end, my father thought about how he'd have to live like this for decades more. He couldn't catch his breath, collapsed, and woke up half paralyzed. The Duke finally realized his useless younger son was his biological child, proving that his older genius kids got their brains from mom, not him. He realized his entire successful life was orchestrated by his ex-wife. He crawled back to beg forgiveness before his daughter's royal wedding, but mom just leaked his location to his crazy new wife. The resulting catfight was so stressful he had a stroke and ended up paralyzed, stuck with the woman he fought the world to be with. He wanted excitement. He got it. Now he is trapped in a bed with his chaos demon forever. Ran Niang tried to run, but my grandparents had people bring her back. Apparently the two of them had another round of fighting. I think my future will definitely be exciting. And so will my father's. Here is what slays me. The mom played the long game like a grandmaster. For decades, she pretended to be a foolish beauty, because that is what her mediocre husband's ego needed. She raised genius kids, managed the wealth, and kept the peace. But the second he betrayed her for a naive mistress, the mask dropped. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She pulled out the receipts and took everything. The best part, her kids, the envy of the capital, packed their bags and left with her. They knew exactly who the MVP of the family was. The dad thought he was the sun. Turns out he was just a confused planet orbiting his wife's brilliance. And the daughter? She learned the most important lesson. Only give 5 parts of your heart, but act out 12 parts of suffering. She used that wisdom to land a loyal prince, travel the world, and live free. The dad got his true love, a disaster, and his freedom, to be paralyzed in a ruined mansion. The mom got her money, her kids, and her peace. Real talk, ladies. Get you an abacus before you get a husband. Sometimes the naive wife isn't clueless. She is just waiting for you to breach the contract so she can liquidate the assets.